If you're in a mood to thank someone, thank Amy Schuster. That is what I would have told our first guest tonight before he tweeted this at 9:56 a.m. The only reason these emails are out is Lawrence had the survivors' lawyers on who gave me the tip to subpoena the estate. Why did Justice or the FBI not get and release these? Congressman Ro Khanna was booked on this program on July 23rd of this year. He followed that night an appearance by attorney Brad Edwards, who revealed in our discussion that the way for Congress to obtain a massive trove of information about Jeffrey Epstein would be to subpoena Jeffrey Epstein's estate. Brad Edwards said that he knows the attorneys handling the Epstein estate, and he is sure that they would immediately comply with such a subpoena, and he was right. Brad Edwards was booked on this program that night by Amy Schuster, whose job is to find us the best lineup of guests possible for this program, and she does it every night without ever checking with me. I usually have no input on the guests. The words I say here are mine. What you hear from me on this program comes from me. I write the scripts, but that's just one piece of a program like this. Melissa Ryerson, for the last several years, has been deciding what the shape of this program should be. She has a much better command of the news landscape than I do every day, and she suggests what we should be covering, and she's always right. And only then do I apply my thinking to what we're going to present to you tonight, and eventually my writing of what we will present to you tonight. But having Brad Edwards, who is an attorney for hundreds of the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein, join us on this program that night was Amy Schuster's idea, and telling us about sending a subpoena to the Epstein estate was Brad Edwards' idea, announced right here on this program. I didn't think that up. I never would have thought of that. And so, yes, Congress issued the subpoena that produced these emails because Brad Edwards suggested that they do that on this program, and Congressman Ro Khanna, who was the next guest on this program that night, immediately said on television that night that he would take up that suggestion. And then he helped lead the charge for the subpoena issued by the House, a Republican-controlled House. A Democratic member of the House of Representatives who gets the idea of issuing a subpoena to the Epstein estate on this program and then brings that idea into a Republican House of Representatives and prevails and manages to persuade the House of Representatives controlled by Donald Trump's loyalists to do something that has the potential to not just crush Donald Trump as a politician, but depending on what else might be revealed in the Epstein files and as a result of this subpoena, maybe Donald Trump's presidency could come to an end. Maybe Donald Trump could become the second president to resign the presidency, the second Republican president to resign the presidency. How bad can this get for Donald Trump? We have no idea, but he does. Donald Trump knows exactly how bad it can get because he knows everything about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. He knows everything that is or might be in the Epstein files or in the possession of the Epstein estate that could be damaging to him. He knows. And we see the way he's behaving about this. This might be the worst of it. What we've discovered in Jeffrey Epstein's emails today might just be the worst of it. And if it is, then Donald Trump can probably survive this. But Donald Trump himself is making an all-out effort to stop the release of the Epstein files after these emails were released today. Donald Trump has made the judgment that what remains hidden in the Epstein files must never be seen by anyone. And that is why he had Congresswoman Lauren Boebert in the White House today, hoping she would be convinced to take her name off of the discharge petition, which she had already signed in the House of Representatives. She did not bend to that pressure. The discharge petition has been officially filed after getting its 218th signature today, when the newest member of the House of Representatives, Adelita Grijalva, in her first act as a member of the House, became the most important member of the House today, when she provided the 218th signature for that discharge petition, which will come to a vote possibly next week in the House of Representatives, that would force the release of the Epstein files. J.D. Vance is doing exactly what Gerald Ford did while the Nixon presidency was sinking and Richard Nixon was under increasing pressure over several months that led to his resignation. Gerald Ford said nothing. When things were the darkest for President Richard Nixon, Vice President Gerald Ford said nothing. And when Richard Nixon resigned the presidency, Vice President Ford said, "Our long national nightmare is over." Tonight, J.D. Vance is silent. Tonight, J.D. Vance is Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford said nothing about Richard Nixon as Nixon sank deeper into scandal, as Nixon, on his way to impeachment, which he only avoided by resigning the presidency, Gerald Ford said nothing because Gerald Ford knew that when he eventually took over the presidency, he didn't want the stain of Nixon on him. And so J.D. Vance is silent tonight. But what is J.D. Vance supposed to say tonight when he reads an email written by Jeffrey Epstein during the Trump presidency in 2019, 6 months before Jeffrey Epstein's second arrest, saying, quote, "Of course he knew about the girls." But Donald Trump's always insisted he never knew anything that Jeffrey Epstein was up to. Never knew anything possibly illegal that Jeffrey Epstein was up to. What is J.D. Vance or Donald Trump or any Trump defender supposed to say tonight when they read an email from Jeffrey Epstein after the first criminal investigation of Jeffrey Epstein in Florida, which led to Jeffrey Epstein pleading guilty? And Jeffrey Epstein writes an email to his criminal co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, in 2011 saying, quote, "I want you to realize that that dog that hasn't barked is Trump." Jeffrey Epstein says that one of the young girls in the investigation, quote, "spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned, police chief, etc." I am 75% there. Donald Trump spent hours at Jeffrey Epstein's house with one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, according to Jeffrey Epstein, in a private communication with his criminal co-conspirator, whose response to this was, "I have been thinking about that." The only way that Ghislaine Maxwell could have been thinking about that is that she knew what Jeffrey Epstein was talking about in every word of that email. That means she knew what it means that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. And Ghislaine Maxwell was not asked a single question about that email by Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer, who now serves as Donald Trump's Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, who went to Florida to do a so-called interview with Ghislaine Maxwell. Donald Trump has obviously been living all year in fear of release of the Jeffrey Epstein files, and tonight that fear has to be more intense than ever. The fear that makes him snap and call Republicans very bad and stupid is an informed fear. It is not an irrational fear. It's an informed fear, because Donald Trump knows exactly what his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein was. We don't. Donald Trump knows exactly how much direct exposure and familiarity he had with the people Jeffrey Epstein calls the girls in his email. We don't. We don't know that, but Donald Trump does. Donald Trump knows everything about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein that might be in the Epstein files. And knowing everything that Donald Trump himself knows about his relationship to Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump had a choice. He could have said, "Let it all come out. I have nothing to fear because I know everything about it and I know there's nothing to fear." Or knowing everything Donald Trump knows about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and after having been briefed about what the Epstein files say about him by his Justice Department, Donald Trump seems to have decided that the Epstein files must never come out. That's the position he has chosen. And now the dog is barking at the very bad and stupid Republicans who support the release of the Epstein files. After the dog barked at those Republicans and called them bad and stupid at 2:03 p.m. today, 4 hours later, Politico reported senior Republicans privately believe dozens of Republicans will vote for it, possibly 100 or more, according to 5 people granted anonymity to speak candidly. And so the mad barking dog might be on his way to creating the biggest bipartisan landslide vote against Donald Trump the House of Representatives has ever seen. Tonight, instead of looking at the Epstein files that were created by the Justice Department's investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, we are looking at emails about Donald Trump written by Jeffrey Epstein that were in the possession of Jeffrey Epstein's estate after his death. And we have those emails tonight thanks to a thread of luck that began 112 days ago when Amy Schuster decided that the guests on this program that night should be attorney for Epstein survivors Brad Edwards, along with Congressman Ro Khanna and Andrew Weissman.